What's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of First and Pod. You know the drill. Danny Parkins, Andrew Fillipponi. Thanks for hanging out with us in the off season. We're going to be seeing each other. I don't know what we're going to do with the pod, Pony. We're going to do an in-person pod in NYC.
Yeah, we got to work out I don't know how we would make that work logistically in terms of the technical part of it too, like all of us in one place. But come on now, you're burying the lead. We need an update on what happened in the United Center Chicago Bulls pickup game.
Yes.
Did you get hurt? You seem to be fine. You're smiling. You didn't limp in here. I don't see a cast. I don't see a neck brace on. So what happened?
So I'm recovered. I was sore for about 72 hours. I bought the new Devin Bookers. So
did you return them?
Did not return them. Liked them, kept them. It was 2 20-minute halves, running clock. There were probably 35, 40 people playing in the game, but like women, children. And so we were divided up based on like gender and height, basically. And so I was certainly in like the upper echelon of like expected athleticism and height.
Oh no.
My 5-man group played the first and last shift of the second half and one shift of the first half. So 15 of a possible 40 minutes. I airballed a 3. I hit two shots, so scored 4 points. Had a couple of block shots.
On kids or adults?
One was a teenager, one was an adult.
A younger teen or older teen? Old enough to drive?
Yeah, old enough to drive.
Okay.
Old enough to drive.
Girl or boy?
Boy.
Okay.
Boy. But dude, I mean, I was winded. That's a tall hoop and a long court. And I've been doing Peloton, but I haven't ran like impact cardio. I haven't ran in a long, long time. So it was crazy. Like for like the 72 hours or so after the game, like it went from like lower back to hamstring to knee, back to hamstring, back to back. Like a new thing hurts depending on the hour of the day for legitimately 3+ days after the fact.
Well, the baskets are 10 feet everywhere, Danny. So that wasn't really. No,
nope.
It is.
Nope.
But the court thing is a legitimate issue. That is a problem. That is much bigger than any high school gym you're going to play in or any local rec center or whatever. So that part I can totally empathize
the backdrop, with you on. The lights, but also like, dude, if you haven't shot a basketball in years.
No warm-up shots given?
No, there were warm-ups.
Then no excuse.
It took a while for it to get back, dude. I'm just saying, that thing felt like a bowling ball. It was
the first shot an air ball?
Oh yeah. Dude, the first shot like fell short of the net. Like it was.
Did it draw a rise out of the crowd? Was there a reaction to it? Was there
mockery? Yeah, laughter.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I pulled up from like 25 feet and came up. I mean, that thing would have been short from 22 feet.
Caitlin Clark over here in this pickup game. That is great stuff.
It was rough, man, but it was hilarious and it was a great time. Went with my nephew Jack.
Is there video of any of these shots? I want to see the air ball.
The Score put a 12-minute YouTube compilation out with.
I gotta go find that.
Yeah, with Bill Wennington and Chuck Swirsky like grading me, Shane running up and down the court like interviewing me during it, me collapsing at the end of the game and almost missing the handshake line because I thought my heart was going to explode. Like
there's content there.
There's a lot of content there, buddy. There's a lot of content. All right. We got a lot to get. So yes, but by the way, we'll be in New York. We'll be around a bunch of media luminaries and First and Pod listeners. So we'll see what we can bring people for next week's episode. But Russell Wilson is officially an ex-Bronco. And so there are two huge stories here, at least to me. There is who, if anyone, is going to commit to Russell Wilson to be their quarterback of next year, and your team is in the mix for that. And so that's the present and the future. But then there is the past, like the postscript to the Denver Broncos, Russell Wilson trade and contract. And I'm fine to do either first, but I would like to discuss with you at some point where that contract and move ranks among the all-time bad investments in NFL history, and in particular, if it's better or worse than the Browns' investment in Deshaun Watson. I've been thinking about this
what do you
for
want?
weeks.
I'll hold your hand and walk with you wherever you want to go, man. I'm good on either one of these.
Okay. Well, so I was just like going through it to like refresh everyone on the details. The Seahawks got 2 first-round picks, and they used them on Charles Cross and Devin Witherspoon, tackle and elite corner. 2 seconds, a 5th, and 3 players. Broncos got Russ in a 4th-round pick. He doesn't play a down of the $245 million extension. They're eating $85 million worth of dead cap, most in NFL history. By far. Matt Ryan's second most at just over $40 million. So literally unprecedented dead cap. Franchise players on offense and defense in the form of draft capital of the other team. Doesn't play it down in the contract. Browns, obviously, $230 million contract, fully guaranteed, average of a $64 million cap hit over the next 3 years. Can't realistically get out of it until 2026. But the Russ thing kind of reinvents it because no team had ever been willing to take on this big of a dead cap before. If the Browns want to pay him $73 million to go away in 2025, they can do that. So like a new precedent has been set here in terms of dead cap money. But obviously, Watson has missed 22 of 34 games, the shame of the suspension, the injury, and Will Anderson, a first-round pick in this year's draft. They traded some of the picks, so it's a little tougher to do the draft recap for what the Texans got, but a massive, massive haul and more still to come. I think the Russ contract with that dead cap money, I respect them for paying it and getting out on front. I still think Watson is the worst deal, but I think it's by like a nose hair. I think it's a nose hair. I think we are in the midst of the 2 worst contracts in NFL history, and they are playing out with Russell Wilson, who was supposed to be a Hall of Famer, and Deshaun Watson, who had a 5,000-yard season for Bill O'Brien before the age of 24. Like, it is so wild that these 2 guys own the 2 worst contracts in NFL history. It feels like every team in the NFL should be terrified. And I'm thinking, I know I'm rambling here, but like, there's no certainty on any of this stuff. Like, is Philly worried about that with them and Jalen Hurts? You know, it's like, if these guys can bust out on these contracts, it feels like it can happen to just about anybody.
It makes me wonder if there's going to be an appetite for another team to give up so much to get a quarterback and then pay him to do both, to give up all the draft capital, all the players, all those things. And oh, by the way, we're also going to give you the most guaranteed money in the biggest contract in NFL history. We're going to give you a $245 million extension. It is the most important position in sports. And if you don't have one, you're desperate to always get one. But I do wonder with these 2 guys if it is precedent setting and if it's going to change behaviors of GMs. It's interesting. I was actually texting with a former GM about the Russell Wilson deal. There is just, I think, a state of shock that Patton, the GM in Denver, still has a job. How do you make that deal? It blows up like this and you're still employed. It's the most fireable offense of like anything. You're saying, is it the worst deal in NFL history? If that's on your resume, you should be sent. When Russell Wilson's cut, you should be too.
Well, yeah, and I mean,
that should be the next press release.
And they don't have a lot of draft capital because of the Russ trade and the Sean Payton move. And there's no path to winning there. I think that the Deshaun one is worse because they did it fully guaranteed and knowingly taking on the controversy, but it's close, man. It's
right.
Close.
As much as it pains me to say this, at the moment, this second, the Wilson deal is worse. Because at least with the Browns, even though it wasn't with Watson, they still went to the playoffs last year. And Watson, in the last game at Baltimore, showed at least a smidgen of hope that he can get back to being the quarterback he was before the trade. Not a lot of it, not a ton to go off of, but at least looked like he was trending in the right direction. Okay. But the reason why it has a chance to flip and go to Cleveland being the worst deal is, let me put it this way. If Denver drafts McCarthy or somebody like that and immediately becomes good because of it, whereas Cleveland is stuck with this Watson contract for a couple more years and then goes into quarterback purgatory after that, it's going to look a lot worse for them than it is Denver. I mean, Denver, like in a vacuum on its own, it is, I think, worse than the Herschel Walker trade, and it is at the moment worse than Deshaun Watson. But if they hit on a quarterback in this draft with Sean Payton, it doesn't seem as punitive, Danny. It just won't. You know, like that's what they're betting on here. I think the biggest reason why Russell Wilson's gone is because Payton has all this power within their organization,
Clearly,
and made the call. If it's another coach with Russell Wilson and he throws 26 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, I think he's still their quarterback right now.
well, because that's what I was thinking when you were saying about Deshaun showing some promise. Like, Russell Wilson wasn't awful last year. Like, he showed some promise. It was a sunk cost fallacy. They were like, he can't live up to this contract. We have a new coach who can maximize any quarterback, so we're going to get out of it as early as possible.
They're not the end all be all at all. They're just a data point or discussion point. Pro Football Focus gave Russell Wilson a better grade in 2023 than Baker Mayfield. And if you look at even the standard numbers, the basic stats, touchdowns, interceptions, that kind of thing, there's not a big divide between the two guys. I mean, if Russell Wilson goes to Houston and wins that game in November, and you flip that into a win instead of a loss, they probably never get rid of Russell Wilson. He plays every game. He throws 30 touchdown passes, and we're talking about it like he had a bounce back season, Danny.
Yeah. Well, he did have a bounce back season. I mean, that's why, to move it to the present day, like, you've been advocating for Russell Wilson on the minimum deal in Pittsburgh because you know he's better than Mason Rudolph or Kenny Pickett. And when we were doing this podcast in the middle of the 2022 season, we were talking about, is Russ cooked? Is he done? Will he ever play a down of productive football again? And he was a productive football player this past year.
Yeah. So let me just say one quick thing about this report about Russell Wilson. And maybe the timing of when people listen to this, the mileage on this next point will vary. But don't you think it's odd at the time we're having this conversation? And I don't say this to denigrate the reporter who's been covering the Steelers for a long time. And this individual has a very close connection to the owner. Okay. So this is not me trying to take down somebody who has a long career in covering a team and doing a good job of it. Isn't it strange to you that literally no one else has confirmed this report? Not one soul. Yeah. We're not talking about, if Jalen Johnson signs the deal like he did on Thursday, he's a big enough player and a big enough name where if Schefter gets it first, now you've got everybody in Chicago who's working to confirm it. Before you know it, there's like 15 people on your X timeline who are saying this is a done deal. Russell Wilson's not the best available quarterback, but he's probably the biggest name based on his resume. And there's nothing from national insiders. And I just find that peculiar. And it makes me wonder, like, why is it that only one person in Pittsburgh has this story and no one else does? Do you not find that odd?
Of course I do. Of course I do. I mean, I found all of the reporting coming out of Pittsburgh to be odd. I find it odd that not interested in any, but like just running it back with Pickett and Mason.
Right. Now, but that's like on the record. You're at the scouting combine. The GM talks. He says things that make that narrative take off because of quotes that are on the record from the
I
organization,
understand.
right? I mean, like,
I'm
you're
just saying, like, understanding the plan of the Steelers
right.
has been confusing for someone who is not in Pittsburgh.
Correct. I mean, yes. I mean, but that to me is different from what I'm getting at, which is why hasn't an Adam Schefter or an Ian Rappaport or a Jay Glazer or a Dan Graziano or a Jeremy
Sure.
Fowler or any of these people confirmed not only this, which is Russell Wilson and the Steelers have talked or are planning on meeting, but in that story, Danny, I don't know if you saw this, the reporter also said that he had already met with another team.
Yeah, I did not see that.
That's a huge nugget, bro.
Yeah, it is.
That's a major piece of news. And no one else has that. So like my brain starts spinning and it's like
He's wrong.
well, but I think I know who he's getting the information from. And like, why are the Steelers putting this out there? Why do they want this out there? What's their agenda? What's their motive? Are they doing it because they're trying to drive Mason Rudolph's price down in a negotiation, which seems, again, insane to people outside of Pittsburgh, but is possible? Is it a leverage play for Justin Fields, which is, hey, we're kind of sort of still in the Justin Fields sweepstakes, but hey, Russell Wilson, come on down. Come talk to us. Now we don't seem as needy and as desperate. I don't know. It's just bizarre to me that only one outlet has this story when we're talking about a future Hall of Fame quarterback who's on the open market.
I don't know if I'd call it a sweepstakes, but we'll get into the latest on Justin Fields and make some predictions for where free agents are going to land. More First and Pod after this. Back in on First and Pod, Danny Parkins, Andrew Fillipponi. Give us a 5-star review. Give us a subscription. Tell a friend about the podcast. Those are the types of things.
Tell coworkers.
Yeah, they could be. Tell enemies. I don't really care who you tell, but we just need to have more
Tell people at the casino when you're playing poker next to them. Tell people at the gentleman's club when they're getting a lap dance next to you.
Yeah,
please.
All things that the awkward conversation in elevators. Small talk on airplanes.
Pillow talk after sex.
Perfect. Uber drivers. There's often awkward silence in those moments. Hey, have you heard of First and Pod? One ST ampersand pod if you're searching on the Odyssey app, but all normal podcast platforms, you can just search First and Pod. So it's all there for you. We were on this, dude. The market. We kind of, I really do credit both of us for this because you were the one who was like, we got to do the exercise of why the other team would want Fields for the system of the offense. And I was like, I know that Ryan Poles is artificially inflating this market by talking to insiders and leaking stuff. And now it seems, and obviously, like you said, this could age poorly by the time people are listening to this. All it takes is one team. The new league year starts on Wednesday. We're recording this on Thursday night. But it seems like Justin Fields is nobody's plan A. And if he is plan B or C, all it's going to take is the right sequencing of quarterbacks in free agency to go to the right teams and enough teams to feel like they have their quote unquote answer in the draft to Justin Fields is going to a spot where he's either competing for a job or has to be a straight backup. And that will drastically change what the trade offers are. And it will drastically change the timeline. And it will get really awkward for Ryan Poles, Caleb Williams, and the Chicago Bears. At this moment in time, as we sit here at 8:36 p.m. Central on Thursday, I think it is more likely that Justin Fields is competing for a job or a backup than Ryan Poles gets a second-round pick and a day 3 pick as if he was going to be the starter. I think the former is more likely than the latter.
And I think he's better than that.
I do too.
I think he's a better quarterback than someone that's ranked somewhere between like 28 and 32 and is just barely an NFL starting quarterback, or is actually on the outside looking in and is on the sideline and is a team's backup. But clearly what's happened here is he's enough of a project, and there's the fifth-year option plus the price tag that the Bears are putting on the player, where it's just not that appealing to teams that can either draft a quarterback or scour the available quarterbacks that you can just sign without surrendering the draft pick for. And so they put themselves in this bind, I think, when they made their intentions clear that they're going to take a quarterback at 1, and they don't want the two players to coexist on the roster together. The town's not big enough for Fields and Caleb Williams. And I agree with that. I think that part of the Bears' outlook on this is right. It's just once that becomes a known thing, your leverage is gone. You know, and you just have to accept that.
Because people keep saying, like, Alex Smith to Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. And it's not the same, man. It's not the same. Those were veterans, made guys, future Hall of Famer, 3 straight double-digit win seasons for Alex Smith.
He had gone to an NFC Championship game.
Completely different stages of their careers. Fields is still trying to prove himself. He's still trying to get paid. He's still trying to get that second contract. He has no interest in being here for Caleb Williams, and he is so popular with a segment of fans, which shouldn't mean a lot, but his name was chanted in his last home game. But he's so popular in the locker room because he's such an awesome leader and dude that if he's here, it really will hurt Caleb Williams' ability to make it his team in his locker room.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would just be an insane handcuff on the number 1 pick in the draft. So if it means like taking 60 cents on the dollar, but to make it cleaner for Caleb Williams, then you just have to do it. You have to bite that bullet.
And I think it's similar in a way to what happened with Cleveland when they made the Watson trade, and then everybody knew they had to get rid of Baker Mayfield. They could not have both guys on the roster. They lost all bargaining power. They ended up trading him to Carolina for a 5th-round pick that, based on percentage of snaps played, could turn into a 4th. That's what they had to settle for. I don't think it's that far-fetched that the same thing could happen to the Bears now, where that's what they end up getting back for Fields. Because even if you play this thing out into free agency, right? Like, let's say Cousins goes to Atlanta. Well, then what does Minnesota do? I don't think Minnesota trades for Justin Fields. I think Minnesota tries to sign Russell Wilson or somebody like that. If they get Russell Wilson, okay, well then is Baker Mayfield back in Tampa? If he is, okay. If he's not, where does he go? And then does Tampa Bay want Justin Fields? I haven't heard that they would be interested. That doesn't seem to be plan B. They've got all their eggs in Mayfield's basket right now. I mean, I brought up Denver last time as maybe a team that emerges, but as you pointed out, they've got nothing to give up in a trade. Doesn't seem like
they just don't have a lot of draft picks. So
right.
It strikes me as unlikely that they would do that again. The team that I keep coming back to that nobody has linked him to.
Giants.
So I've seen that a little bit. What if the Patriots decide that they are not ready to draft a quarterback? That they should either take Marvin Harrison Jr., just like get blue chip players, or more likely trade out of the 3rd spot to Vegas, the Giants, Atlanta, whomever, and acquire a bunch of assets, kick the can down the road on drafting a future quarterback, and say, okay, now who's a guy who's a great culture guy and who, frankly, is so naturally talented, can make chicken salad out of chicken bleep and doesn't need a whole heck of a lot around him to be competitive when he puts on his Superman cape. And he will come here, struggle, but he's been in disadvantageous situations before and handled it like a complete pro, and go be a bridge quarterback until they're ready to draft a QB and they've got a little bit more of a infrastructure around him. Because if you go to New England right now as the 3rd overall pick, you've got very little chance of success.
So I think that that's not like a crazy far-fetched scenario, but tell me if you think that's more likely than this. They sign Jacoby Brissett. They draft Drake Maye with the 3rd pick, and Maye sits behind Brissett for most of the season. What do you think is a better strategy?
Well,
I like that idea more. I like Brissett to Maye more than trading for Fields and moving back in the draft.
So the only problem with that, I mean, obviously it depends how much you like Drake Maye, right? Like that's the obvious thing. Like Drake Maye seems to have a pretty wide range of opinion on him right now. But if you love Drake Maye, that's the move. If you don't like Drake Maye, I think my way is the move, because we've seen like what San Francisco had to give up to go from 12 to 3 in the Trey Lance draft, what the Panthers had to give up to go from 9 to 1 in the Bryce Young draft. Like if they trade from 3 to Minnesota, like if they trade out of the top 10 from the 3rd pick in the draft, they will get a lot of assets. And yes, they won't have their quarterback of the future, but they'll have 2 first-round picks in each of the next 2 drafts where they can start maneuvering it around. Like I'm not sure that they're a year away even from Drake Maye being able to step into a better situation unless they get a bunch of premium assets. So if you love Drake Maye, you obviously take him and stash him. I agree with you. But then there's just a lot. I've lived it here, man. There's just a lot of pressure. Jacoby Brissett sucks. Jacoby Brissett gets injured. You're playing him 4-6 games into his rookie year, and it's just you're setting the guy up to fail.
Yeah, I want to come back to my team here and bring the Steelers back up for Fields if the price keeps falling, because we know that Tomlin likes Fields. Schefter has said that. I've been saying this. I've been saying that on the podcast even before he said that. It was strange to me that one of the things that came out of the combine was some of these new Steelers offensive assistant coaches were willing to say to reporters, one in particular, that they didn't want to dump Kenny Pickett for another team's trash was the word.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't think they were talking about Kirk Cousins or Baker Mayfield when they used the word trash. I think we know what quarterback they were talking about. So unless they're not clued in to how the head coaches felt in the past, or unless Mike Tomlin's changed his mind and they're echoing what he said, or the third thing, they're just BSing reporters and trying to get them off the scent. I just thought that was significant that at least that message got put out there, like, we're not interested in Fields. They should be, especially if things continue to go this way, where you can get him for like the price that Trey Lance was acquired for last offseason.
Which is crazy, because he's better than that. He's proven more than that. And Trey Lance was traded clearly for a 4th round pick to straight up be a backup. But if
third
that
stringer,
right? But if that happens, I mean, it's not interesting as much as you're trading to be a backup. But like, the best teams in the NFL should be interested. San Francisco should be interested. Philly should be interested. You know, like if that's what happens, then I think we'll change a lot of like the who we're talking about here. And when Ryan Poles says like do right by Justin Fields, I think that in that scenario he might like be brought into the mix and say, hey, if we're just getting a 4th or a 5th round pick, they'll have 15 teams that'll be interested.
Well, the number one team that should be interested in that situation, and he does not fit what they're trying to do at all with the starter. But in that scenario, the Jets should be interested because of what happened with Aaron Rodgers last year, to have a viable player behind him ready to go. But they won't be, because he doesn't fit the offense. And I don't think Aaron Rodgers wants to deal with that BS. I would wonder about Seattle if that happened, because it doesn't seem like they're committed to Geno Smith long-term. they put out messages like they've got way more, like they've got this weird amount of confidence in Drew Lock behind him.
Yeah.
That seems to get repeated by the power brokers there over and over again.
He was one of the 3 players in the Russell Wilson trade.
But if you're Michael McDonald and you just had Lamar Jackson as your quarterback in Baltimore, I would think you'd look at Justin Fields and say, okay, we can try to recreate that here. We can be the NFC version of where I just was with this quarterback for the next 5 to 10 years.
All right, you want to try to...
And Carolina, by the way. I'm going to just say them too. Wouldn't that be interesting?
See, I don't think they want any part of that.
But should they? Yes.
Sure, but I think that Bryce Young's backup will be the least threatening person in the world. They're not...
Andy Dalton.
Okay, more First and Pod after this. All right, back in on First and Pod. Subscribe, rate, review. 5-star reviews are appreciated. Send us to us on Twitter at Danny Parkins, at the Pony Express. We'll retweet it, show you some love. All right, Kirk Cousins, Minnesota, Atlanta, or somewhere else?
Atlanta. And I hope at some point on the podcast I had mentioned that. There was this big thing about his wife, and I heard that too, that she's from down there. I think there's a scheme fit there with Robinson and with Morris coming over from LA. There's obviously the playmakers there. They've got the cap space to give him the money that he wants. It's an easier division right now. There's no Detroit. There's no Green Bay and Jordan Love. Go to Atlanta.
No Caleb Williams.
No Caleb Williams. Okay, Danny, there you go.
Thank you.
So I get it from Kirk Cousins' perspective. If I'm Atlanta, though, if I were doing radio down there would be part of me that would be saying, we just lived this with Matt Ryan, where we watched him fall off a cliff in his late 30s. We're going to give this guy $50 million a year at 37, 38 years old. That just would not sit right with me.
Coming off of an Achilles injury.
And I would just be very, 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 very worried about that.
Okay, but if you're Atlanta, would you rather trade first-round picks to move up in the draft to take the 3rd or 4th quarterback prospect? Or just give Kirk
No,
Cousins
if I were Atlanta, I would trade a 2nd or 3rd. I would trade a 3rd that could turn into a 2nd to the Bears, and I would go with Justin Fields.
Yeah, but they don't like that for the system.
They're not going to do that, right? But that's just if I were in charge.
Yeah.
But given the 2 options that you gave me, I would do the Cousins thing. But I'm going to say this again, and I brought this up to you, and I feel like it's now, I said it, and I feel like you've started to hear more whispers of this. Baker Mayfield to Atlanta. I don't think that that's out of the question because of the infrastructure they have there. And Zach Robinson was with him in LA, and that was his pet project when he got traded there. I told you that on the podcast. And I think if it's not Kirk Cousins, if Mayfield goes to market, if he does not get a deal done before noon on Monday, I think he could end up in Atlanta because it's cheaper than Kirk Cousins on an annual deal. So there you go.
All right. I'll be surprised if Baker's not back in Tampa. I do think that Cousins in Atlanta makes a ton of sense. And then if you're Minnesota, I don't think they're going to be in the market for Fields. And it's a question of, are they a Russell Wilson spot, or are they going to draft a quarterback either where they sit or trade up and then risk being Jared Goff, Jordan Love, Caleb Williams, and like Bo Nix, the 4th or 5th quarterback in this year's draft? That doesn't seem like a recipe for long-term success, even though their coach is awesome.
So somebody who I trust, like on Vikings things with my life, believes that they're going to do whatever is necessary to get JJ McCarthy. That the scouting combine and meeting with him and everything else confirmed that for them. And that of all the teams out there, they are the best destination for him. And it's just a matter of how they have to move around to get him where they have to go to get him, and if that's quarterback plan A from week 1 of this season, or if there's somebody that they need to pair with him in order to make that work. But that's what I've heard. No guarantee that they get him. I mean, they're not the only team that might be smitten by him and want to move around for him, but
people love him.
I think more than moving up for Daniels or moving up for Maye, that's what they do. In fact, I think now here's the one caveat on Maye that I'll throw out there from this Vikings source. I don't know if you knew this. Did you know that Josh McCown was Drake Maye's high school football coach?
Yeah.
Think about that. Just file that away.
All right. I
don't know if First and Pod listeners knew that. You did, because you obviously do all your homework on this stuff.
Well, no, I mean, we were big on the Drake Maye v. Caleb Williams stuff for a while, like during the season. But Jaden Daniels has somehow jumped Drake Maye, which I still don't fully understand. And then Chris Sims had Drake Maye as his 6th quarterback prospect.
Well, Chris Sims also had Matt Corral as the best quarterback in the draft 2 years ago, but he also has hit some grand slams with these draft rankings.
Yeah, he's good. Like I hold him in very high esteem. Like, and he does his homework, and so it shocked me. It shocked me to see that. Chris Jones, we both have him going back to the Chiefs.
Well, now, what do you mean we both have him going back to the Chiefs? Because I thought, were of the opinion at the end of the season, like, hey, he just seems like he's going to get too expensive for them. He had a great run in Kansas City. Now it's time for him to go get his big payday somewhere else.
Yes, absolutely. And I've said that I think that Snead, if you had to do one or the other, is the move because of age and all of that. But it looks like I'm wrong. Chris Jones.
Why? Because of something he said when he was drunk after they won the Super Bowl?
When he was drunk, what he said what he's posted of that him and Andy Reid on social media very recently. Like the word out of Kansas City is that there's an expectation that Snead is going to be tagged and traded, and that Chris Jones is going to be brought back. It seems like they are just going to the allure of the three-peat, and Jones has been more valuable to the run, this era of Chiefs football. It feels like they are more likely to run back with Chris Jones than, I mean, dude, he was holding out. He was in the suite at the opener with his weird agents. And then at the end of the year, he's hugging Andy Reid and vowing to return and posting about him on social media as the tampering period opens. Like, it just feels like Chris Jones is going back to Kansas City to me, even though that's not what I would have said to you 4 weeks ago.
More years and more guaranteed money. If the Houston Texans offer him both of those things, does he leave Kansas City for Houston?
It depends how close it is. I think Houston's going to make a huge run at Christian Wilkins.
Right, but I'm saying if they have the cap space for both,
they're not going to do that.
No. I'm not. No. I don't mean signing both. I mean they could sign either one. I'm saying they have their choice in terms of they can make a big offer to Jones. I would prefer Jones to Wilkins, me personally. Jones has done it every year. I think his body of work is better.
His body of work is much better. He's older though.
Right. Well, I think that would be interesting if Houston, because they've got Stroud there and because of who the coach is, if they came and they offered better money, would Chris Jones take it? I tend to think he would. And that's a situation I think he'd go to over Kansas City. Probably not New England or Washington or one of these other teams with a lot of money, but I think he might consider Houston in that situation.
Well, I wanted to talk about Wilkins because I think the Bears make a lot of sense for him. Matt Eberflus needs a 3 technique. He says DeForest Buckner's the favorite player he's ever coached. He runs the 3-4. They drafted Gervon Dexter in the second round, who had a nice season, but they tried to sign Larry Ogunjobi their first year here. He failed the physical.
And now we're stuck with him.
Yeah, now the Steelers are stuck with him. Exactly. They traded out of the rights to draft Jalen Carter because of the character issues. Christian Wilkins he's been great against the run his whole career, just had the best pass rush season of his career. He's only missed I can't remember. It's either 2 or 3. I think it's 3 games. I think he's missed 3 games since he's come into the league. Maximum effort guy. He'll be the only reason he wasn't re-signed in Miami is because of their cap situation, and they ended up signing the other defensive tackle after they weren't able to work it out with him last year when they tried. Wilkins is about as perfect of a player to actually hit free agency that you'll see when you just factor in premium position, age, health, coming off of an awesome season. Like, every team that has the cap space to afford him is going to be in on him. And I would think that the Bears and the Texans are going to be very high up on his list of suitors.
Yeah, and I want to throw one more team in there. I agree with that. I think that the Bears are a player for both of those guys, and you would obviously know them better than me, so that just that's confirmation bias for me. Cincinnati's got, I think, money for one more big ticket guy, and then eventually they're going to have to pay the piper. But in this window here, where Higgins is being franchise tagged and probably not given a long-term deal, could they get, after their defense sucked last year, I mean, was awful, was terrible, can they go out and get one of these guys, Wilkins or Chris Jones? I mean, to steal from Kansas City would be massive for them. Somebody along those lines, because the corners aren't available now, right? I mean, unless they do, would Kansas City want to do it, sign and trade with them? Probably not.
Probably not, yeah.
Right. I mean, Jalen Johnson's back in Chicago. So Patrick Queen maybe to Cincinnati. I'm just saying, like, I think that they've got a need for it, obviously, but also, like, they're not going to be able to make a move like this maybe in a year or two. So just a thought.
My last free agent thought ahead of this is the quality of safeties and running backs that are out there. These contracts are going to be so interesting because the cap has gone up, but the volume, like the supply, is so high, and these are premium positions. I mean, the Bills getting rid of Poyer, the Broncos getting rid of Simmons, Quandre Diggs is out there. I mean, Eddie Jackson is out there. Just high-level starting caliber safeties, and then running backs ridiculous. Derrick Henry, Jacobs, Saquon, Eckler, Pollard, Moss, Singletary. It's insane. These are all starting caliber players, but they're not premium positions. It feels to me like the win for any of those guys is going to be like, who gets more than a 1-year deal? Like, what I was saying on the show today and yesterday was just wait. Like, what's the difference between, like, I'd rather have Josh Jacobs on a 1-year deal than Saquon on a 3-year deal. Like, you know what I mean? Like, whoever is left in that game of musical chairs without a team when March 13th and the league year opens, just sign whoever is still available March 15th or 16th to a 1-year deal and kick the can down the road in those non-premium positions.
None of those guys at running back are coming off of good years. That's why they're here, and they're older. You know, it's not a situation, to your point, where one of those guys distinguished themselves and then was just, got caught in the wash of what is the evolving world of football, where these running backs have become devalued. They're all coming off seasons where they took a considerable step back. Pollard never, now is the showcase back, didn't get it done. Eckler scored touchdowns, but didn't really do anything else. Henry looked like he was a 30-year-old running back. Barkley was much better in 2022. All these guys come with that. Like, they're on the downsides of their careers, and they didn't look good they didn't look as good last year. So I think that's why, you're not, you're willing to pay less, because there's not one guy that is head and shoulders above the other players that are out there. And then as far as the safeties are concerned, like, it's the same thing. These are names. Are any of them really in their prime? You're right. It will be interesting. But they keep saying that the college game keeps producing more and more wide receivers, and there's all these great receivers out there. And then we get to free agency, and there's no receivers. Isn't that funny?
Because the great ones get paid by their own team, or so you have to either trade for them or they sign their own guys. And then like if a guy who's even above average gets the free agency, like Christian Kirk, he gets $72 million.
Right. So like Gabe Davis will be an interesting case study. How much money does he get from somebody in free agency when he was clearly a number 2 wide receiver, borderline number 2 wide receiver in Buffalo, but there's not much else out there and people just want wide receivers.
Yeah, I think Darnell Mooney, who fell off a cliff, but Fields just wasn't able to go off of his number 1 read. Like, I think Mooney's a good player. And if I was him, I was advising him, I would say, take the best 1-year deal you can get in the best offense you can get to and prove to people that you're good. And I'll say this too, like Saquon had a ton of mileage on him. You would know this in college. And then he's had a ton of mileage in the pros. He's a freak of nature, man, when he's healthy. And he's still only 27. He's got a ton of mileage, but he's 27. I really want to see him in a good offense.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Not in an offense where he's the clear number 1. You know what I mean? Like I don't know where it would be, but all the teams that we know, like go to Dallas, go to Kansas City, go to Buffalo, go to LA with Herbert. That would be incredible, actually, if he replaced Eckler and went out there with Greg Roman and Harbaugh and Hurt. That would be unbelievably fun. But go to a place that's got options offensively so teams can't key in on you. And then if he's healthy, I think he's got the potential for a massive season.
Danny, when we talk next, a lot of these decisions will have been made. So we'll be reacting to these moves and not predicting them anymore. And I'm looking forward to it. And it'll be in person, which will be outstanding.
Yep. We'll figure out how we're going to do that and how sober we'll be from New York City. Thank you, Spencer Ray, our producer. He's Andrew Fillipponi. I'm Danny Parkins. Tell a friend. First and Pod. Peace.